Part 1. Before the Legend. What if the song that made Rascal Flatts the biggest band in country music wasn't even theirs? It had already been recorded, already passed around Nashville, already written off as just another beautiful song that never found its audience. Then three musicians with almost nothing in common recorded it, and everything changed. It sold millions of records, dominated radio, and turned them into country music's biggest crossover stars. But that same song also convinced Nashville they had discovered the perfect formula, a formula that would slowly become impossible to escape. This is the song that made Rascal Flatts legends, but trapped them in pop country hell. Nashville has always been a city built on impossible dreams. Every morning, another moving truck rolled into town. Every afternoon, another songwriter walked the sidewalks of Music Row, carrying a notebook full of lyrics they believed could change their lives. Every night, another singer stepped onto a stage hoping someone important might be listening. Most weren't. The city rewarded talent, but it rewarded timing even more. By the late 1990s, country music was changing. Garth Brooks had transformed stadium concerts into blockbuster events. Shania Twain had shown that country could conquer pop radio without abandoning its roots. Faith Hill was crossing effortlessly between genres, and record executives were searching for the next act that could appeal to everyone. Somewhere in the middle of that changing landscape, three musicians were unknowingly moving toward each other. Gary LeVox never sounded like anyone else in Nashville. Raised in Columbus, Ohio, his voice wasn't rough around the edges. It didn't carry the gravelly drawl many associated with traditional country music. Instead, it soared effortlessly into the upper register with remarkable power and clarity. Some producers loved it immediately. Others weren't sure where it belonged. Too polished for traditional country, too country for mainstream pop. DeMarcus, Gary's second cousin, had arrived in Nashville chasing a different dream. A gifted bassist, arranger, producer, and songwriter, DeMarcus wasn't simply interested in performing. He wanted to understand how records were built. Every harmony, every instrument, every production decision fascinated him. He possessed the rare ability to hear an entire record before anyone had stepped inside the studio. The final piece came from Oklahoma. Joe Don Rooney had grown up surrounded by country music, but his guitar playing carried unmistakable traces of classic rock. He admired players who knew when not to play. His solos were tasteful rather than flashy. His rhythm work quietly held songs together without demanding attention. He wasn't looking to become a star. He simply wanted to make great music. Ironically, the band itself almost never existed. One evening, Gary LeVox was performing at the Fiddle and Steel Guitar Bar in Nashville when Joe Don Rooney happened to join him on stage. DeMarcus watched from the audience. Nobody had planned anything. There were no auditions, no record executives, no carefully orchestrated meeting, just three musicians discovering that together they sounded different. The harmonies locked almost instantly. It wasn't just technically impressive, it felt effortless. Sometimes musicians spend years trying to manufacture chemistry. This one arrived in a single night. Before long, Lyric Street Records offered the trio a recording contract. Their name, Rascal Flatts, was chosen almost as casually as the band itself had formed. It wasn't meant to carry deep symbolism. It simply sounded fun, energetic, and memorable. At first, success came steadily rather than spectacularly. Their debut single, Prayin' for Daylight, climbed into the top 10. Then came This Everyday Love. Then, I'm Moving On. Each release expanded their audience a little further. Critics praised the harmonies. Fans loved Gary's unmistakable voice. Concert crowds grew larger. But Nashville was full of talented artists making good records. Being good wasn't enough. To become legends, a band needed one song. The kind of song people remembered decades later. The kind of song that permanently attached itself to weddings, graduations, anniversaries, and life's biggest moments. Rascal Flatts hadn't found that song yet. Meanwhile, another song had been quietly waiting. Long before Rascal Flatts ever heard it, Bless the Broken Road had already lived several lives. Written by Marcus Hummon, Bobby Boyd, and Jeff Hanna, it told a deceptively simple story. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every wrong turn eventually leading someone exactly where they were meant to be. It wasn't flashy, There were no clever gimmicks, no massive key changes, no unforgettable guitar riff. Just extraordinary songwriting. The song had already been recorded by several respected artists, including the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, but none of those versions found a significant audience. Around Nashville, it became one of those songs musicians quietly admired. Beautiful, timeless, almost magical, yet somehow incomplete. It was as though the song itself was still waiting for the right voice, the right arrangement, the right moment. Then, in 2004, Rascal Flatts walked into the studio. No one, not even the band, could have imagined they were about to record the defining song of their entire career, or that it would change country music forever. Part 2. The song that changed everything. For years, Bless the Broken Road had been Nashville's best-kept secret. Songwriters loved it, artists respected it, publishers believed in it, but somehow every version felt like it was missing something. It wasn't a song that demanded attention, it whispered instead. And perhaps that was the problem. Country radio in the early 2000s wasn't short on great songs. Every week, another rising star competed for airtime. To break through, a record needed more than good lyrics. It needed a voice people couldn't forget. Rascal Flatts turned out to be that voice. When producer Mark Bright began working with the trio on what would become Feels Like Today, he already understood the band's greatest strength. It wasn't simply Gary LeVox's remarkable range. It wasn't Joe Don Rooney's tasteful guitar work. And it wasn't DeMarcus's meticulous ear for harmony. It was what happened when all three worked together. Unlike many country groups, Rascal Flatts didn't sound like three musicians sharing a microphone. They sounded like one voice with impossible depth. Every harmony wrapped around Gary's soaring lead vocal instead of competing with it. Jay's lower register anchored the performance while Rooney's high harmonies floated almost unnoticed above it. Together, they created a sound that felt bigger than three people should have been able to produce. That became the heart of Bless the Broken Road. The arrangement was deceptively simple. A gentle piano, acoustic guitar, soft strings, subtle percussion. Nothing distracted from the story. Then Gary LeVox stepped to the microphone. From the very first line, the song felt different. He didn't sing it like a country singer trying to impress Nashville. He sang it like someone remembering every disappointment that had led him to that exact moment. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't overproduced. It was deeply personal. As the chorus arrived, the harmonies expanded behind him almost effortlessly, lifting the song without overwhelming it. Inside the control room, people began looking at one another. They knew. Sometimes everyone involved in a recording recognizes it at exactly the same moment. This wasn't simply another album track. This was the single. When Bless the Broken Road was released in late 2004, radio programmers responded almost immediately. Requests poured in. Stations increased rotation. Listeners called, asking to hear it again. Within weeks, the song climbed to #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. But something unusual was happening. The audience wasn't limited to country fans. Adult contemporary stations began adding the record. Pop audiences embraced it. Churches used it. Military families embraced it during emotional homecomings. Wedding planners couldn't book ceremonies without hearing it requested. The song escaped country music altogether. It became part of American life. By early 2005, it seemed impossible to avoid. It played in grocery stores, department stores, airport terminals, family reunions, graduation ceremonies, countless first dances between newly married couples. For millions of listeners, Bless the Broken Road wasn't simply a hit record. It became their song. Meanwhile, Feels Like Today exploded. The album raced up the charts, eventually selling millions of copies. Arena tours replaced theaters. Television appearances multiplied. Award nominations arrived almost monthly. Then came the biggest validation of all. At the 2005 Grammy Awards, Bless the Broken Road won Best Country Performance by a duo, or group with vocal. For three musicians who had spent years wondering if Nashville would ever fully embrace them, it felt like confirmation that they had arrived. They were no longer one of country's promising young acts. They were its biggest group, but enormous success has a way of rewriting expectations. The very qualities that made Bless the Broken Road extraordinary soon became the blueprint everyone expected Rascal Flatts to follow. Record executives wanted more soaring ballads. Radio programmers wanted more emotional love songs. Fans wanted another wedding anthem. Every conversation seemed to end with the same question. What's the next Bless the Broken Road? No one was asking what kind of music the band wanted to make. They were asking how quickly they could recreate Lightning. Ironically, Rascal Flatts had never set out to become the face of crossover country. The three musicians who had grown up loving Alabama, Restless Heart, and classic Nashville harmonies still thought of themselves as a country band. But the audience was changing. By the mid-2000s, country music itself was evolving faster than anyone realized. Shania Twain had already proven country could dominate pop charts. Faith Hill had crossed effortlessly into mainstream radio. Keith Urban blended rock guitar with Nashville songwriting. Record labels saw opportunity. Why limit a song to country listeners when millions more might embrace it? Suddenly, crossover success wasn't an exception. It became the business model, and no group embodied that strategy better than Rascal Flatts. Their harmonies were polished enough for pop radio. Their production sounded massive. Their lyrics were universal. Their image appealed to families as much as hardcore country fans. Every ingredient was commercially irresistible. The next singles only reinforced the formula. Fast Cars and Freedom. Skin. Then came What Hurts the Most. Originally recorded by another artist, the song became even bigger in Rascal Flatts' hands. Its towering chorus, pristine production, and emotionally charged vocal performance climbed country charts before spilling into mainstream radio. Once again, another crossover success, another platinum record, another sold-out tour, another reminder that Nashville had discovered exactly what America wanted, or so it seemed. Because while millions of new fans were discovering Rascal Flatts for the very first time, a different conversation had quietly begun. Not in the arenas, not on the charts, but among the people who had loved country music long before crossover became fashionable. Some were beginning to ask an uncomfortable question. Had Rascal Flatts become too successful to still sound like country? That question would follow them for the rest of their career. And before long, even the band couldn't escape it. Part 3. The Price of the Perfect Formula. By 2006, Rascal Flatts had become something no country group had achieved in years. They weren't simply selling records, they were defining an era. Every new album debuted near the top of the charts. Every tour grew larger than the last. Television producers wanted them on award shows. Morning programs booked them. Their songs became the soundtrack to weddings, graduations, military homecomings, and family photo slideshows across America. For millions of fans, Rascal Flatts represented optimism, hope, family, love. Their music made people feel good, and that was exactly the problem. While mainstream audiences embraced them, another group of listeners watched Nashville changing around them. Traditional country fans had always accepted evolution. Country music had survived the Nashville sound of the 1960s, the urban cowboy movement of the 1980s, and Garth Brooks' stadium revolution in the 1990s. But this felt different. Critics began arguing that the genre itself was becoming smoother, safer, and more predictable. Steel guitars appeared less frequently. Fiddles were pushed deeper into the mix. Rock guitars became cleaner. The production became brighter, more polished, more cinematic. To many listeners, Rascal Flatts had become the face of that transformation. It wasn't entirely fair. The band hadn't created the trend. They had simply become its biggest success story. But history often remembers symbols more clearly than causes. The irony was impossible to ignore. Gary LeVox still considered himself a country singer. DeMarcus remained deeply rooted in Nashville's songwriting community, producing records and championing traditional musicians behind the scenes. Joe Don Rooney continued adding tasteful guitar work that often disappeared beneath the lush vocal arrangements listeners remembered most. The musicians hadn't fundamentally changed, the audience had, and so had the business surrounding them. Inside record label offices, there was little interest in creative reinvention. Why would there be? Every album was selling, every arena was full. Every ballad seemed destined to become another radio staple. Success had become its own kind of prison. Each platinum record made experimentation more dangerous. Each #1 single narrowed the road ahead. If the band leaned toward harder country, executives worried about losing pop audiences. If they experimented with rock, country radio hesitated. If they tried something completely unexpected, fans compared it to Bless the Broken Road. Every new release carried the same invisible expectation. Give us that feeling again. But moments like that rarely happen twice. Songs like My Wish, Stand, and Here Comes Goodbye continued the remarkable run of commercial success. Each was beautifully performed. Each connected emotionally with listeners. Each reinforced the sound that had made Rascal Flatts one of the biggest acts in America. Yet, with every hit, the criticism grew louder. Reviewers increasingly described the trio as adult contemporary with cowboy boots. Some questioned whether they belonged on country radio at all. Others argued that Rascal Flatts had opened the door for an entirely new generation of crossover acts, forever changing what country music sounded like. Whether that was praise or criticism depended entirely on who was listening. The band rarely responded. Instead, they kept touring, night after night, city after city, thousands of miles of interstate highways, thousands of sound checks, thousands of standing ovations. From the stage, none of the debates seemed to matter. The audiences sang every word. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Couples wrapped their arms around one another during Bless the Broken Road. Veterans wiped away tears. Parents held newborn babies. Those moments reminded the band why they had started making music in the first place. Not to satisfy critics, but to connect with people. Still, time catches every artist. By the late 2000s, country music had changed once again. Luke Bryan, Jason Aldean, Florida Georgia Line, and a new generation of artists dominated the airwaves with a very different sound. The polished crossover ballads that had once felt revolutionary were no longer setting the direction. They had become part of country music's recent history. In 2020, Rascal Flatts announced what many believed would be a triumphant farewell. After 2 decades together, they planned one final tour, a celebration of everything they had accomplished. It felt like the perfect ending. Then the world stopped. The COVID-19 pandemic brought live music to a standstill. Arena lights went dark. Tour buses stayed parked. The farewell tour quietly disappeared. It never returned. As the years that followed unfolded, personal challenges within the band made a reunion increasingly uncertain. Joe Don Rooney's well-publicized legal troubles added another layer of complexity to the group's future, while each member increasingly focused on individual projects. There was no dramatic final concert, no emotional goodbye before a packed arena, no last chorus of Bless the Broken Road echoing through the speakers. For a band whose career had been built on unforgettable moments, the ending arrived almost silently. Yet endings rarely define great bands, legacies do. Today, Rascal Flatts occupies a fascinating place in country music history. To one generation, they were the group that made country music feel welcoming, emotional, and universal. Their harmonies became instantly recognizable. Their songs remain fixtures at weddings and celebrations nearly 20 years after they first topped the charts. To another generation, they symbolize the moment country music moved decisively toward pop, a shift that is still debated today. Perhaps both views are true. Because Rascal Flatts didn't just benefit from country music's evolution, they helped shape it. And it all traces back to one remarkable recording, a song they didn't write, a song that had been waiting patiently for the right voices, a song that transformed 3 talented musicians into one of the most successful groups in country music history. But success has a strange way of asking for payment. Bless the Broken Road gave Rascal Flatts everything they had dreamed about. #1 records, Grammy Awards, platinum albums, sold-out arenas. A permanent place in country music history. It also gave millions of listeners an expectation the band could never completely escape. For the rest of their career, every new song would be measured against that one extraordinary moment. Every album would be compared to the feeling it created. Every creative decision would be judged through the lens of the song that changed everything. Sometimes the road that leads you exactly where you always wanted to go becomes the only road people ever want you to travel. And that's the strange paradox of Rascal Flatts. The song that made them legends may also have been the song that made it impossible for them to become anything else.